I'm John McDonald, aka Panabon, aka Panajon, aka Zordon. I have so many AKAs at Rem, it's unbelievable. Um, I am here doing the fourth Friday Rem Chat, and today our first guest for the new fourth Friday Rem Chat is going to be Jennifer Brozak. You may recognize Jennifer from their Tears of Perseus interview from Rules of Cool with Gen Con TV, and I invited them back because I heard some really cool stuff in the interview, and I want us all to get to know Jennifer better. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Oh,
Hello.
Lilu just
Thank you for
left.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy cat wrangling schedule. They are not statues, they're actual cats. Our tech guy was like, "What a great statue!" And then it moved, and it was like, "No, that's a real cat."
Well, the cats rotate in and out, so you'll see a paw come in, or a cat will jump on me, or jump down onto me. It was exciting during the Tears of Perseus interview.
I really liked that interview, and I do have to say, the person that won the set of books, Elizabeth, or as I know her, Jane Russell, my Red Ranger in my podcast, she could not pick a favorite book or moment, and I kept wanting to be like, "Tell me your favorite moment from Camille's Light," and she was like, "I loved it all. I can't give you a moment." Yes,
Well, okay. Well, we might as well say something about who I am
yeah. What would
for this
people know
second.
you for? Yeah, definitely.
Yes, my name's Jennifer Brozak. I am an author, an editor, and a media tie-in writer, which means I write for other franchises that I don't own. Like I've written for Predator and V Wars and the Fivefold Universe, BattleTech, Shadowrun, Valdemar. So I'm kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Masters of Orion, and I have edited 22 or 23 anthologies now, and I have, oh gosh, I think 12 novels out and 9 novellas out right now across the board.
That is an amazing body of work. I am humbled, and it's so great to have you on the show. After you talked about Tremille's Light, it made me think a little bit of the Aliens franchise, and I think you actually mentioned that. And so, like, I wanted to have you on because, like, mentioning aliens is very sci-fi horror, which is something I'm a big fan of. And I heard you're a Babylon 5 fan as well, which I'm also a fan of. So it's really cool to have like a sci-fi horror kind of community awareness author come on to talk. So hello, welcome. Yes.
Hello, thank you.
Yes.
I'm happy to talk about all of it.
I'm happy to talk about it too. So we can start. So I did some interview questions. We can start on books if you like, because I read your blog to get ready for this interview. It's a great blog. If you haven't read the blog, it's an amazing place to see how Jennifer's mind kind of works and what she wants us to get from the worlds that she builds. I specifically liked how you talk about books themselves and I guess in this day and age, the question is why books still? Why advocate for books? What do books bring that other forms of media do not?
Well, books are, they're the kind of thing that allow you to empathize, inspire, to dream, to escape, to enjoy, to step into someone else's shoes and experience things. Um, Unlike any other medium, novels allow you to go into a flow state where you become part of the story, where the magic of reading is that moment where you're no longer consciously reading, you're just experiencing the story in your head as the character. You see the words, and they translate into all these different images that you identify with, and it can help change your perspective on things. Novels can allow you to understand where another person's coming from. They can allow you to impart knowledge to other people. I think Stephen King said that it was the nearest form of telepathy and
Hmm.
time travel you can ever have. And so I think that novels are incredibly important. There's so much
Yeah.
you can learn from reading novels, fiction, prose from other countries.
I was looking to my right because I have a shelf of books on writing. So I have Chuck Palahniuk's Consider This and Bird by Bird by Bird. I was looking for my copy of On Writing by Stephen King because I was like, is that in his book? I think it might be in his book. I can't remember.
And it's the whole art exercise of think of a rabbit in a cage with the number 8 on it. I believe that was what the exercise was.
Ah. Whenever I think of a rabbit, I just think of Rocky and Bullwinkle and the watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat from Rocky and Bullwinkle, and it was never a rabbit at all.
Yeah.
Um, yes. So in your books, do you focus a lot on empathy? Do you try to create empathy in the reader, or do you think your books are just empathetic generally? Or
Well, when I tell a story, I tell it because I have something to say. It's some concept, some feeling, something to impart beyond wanting to entertain.
yeah,
Um, with let's see how she runs. It's a Shadowrun novella. I do a lot of young adult as well as adult fiction. Um, when I told my editor I wanted to write about a young adult um, Shadowrun and the different scenarios I could do. At one point, I was like, and I want to do one about a bunch of the lower class, the poor kids, the people who are just trying to get along. And he immediately was like, oh yeah, and they can have drugs and gangs. And I'm like, no, no, I grew up very, very, very poor. And most poor people are just trying to get along. They're just trying to make it through the day. They're doing whatever they can to do that. And I want to impart that concept into the world of Shadowrun of yes, there are bad people, yes, there are gangs, but 90% of the people out there are not like that. They are a community, they work together, they all know that one person whose father is either absentee or mother who is an alcoholic, but those people are not the norm. And everybody who can tries to support that one person, especially from the young adult perspective, because kids by and large don't have a lot of power. And it's like, how do they take power? How do they influence the world around them? And I wanted to show what it was like, being growing up without not a lot.
I like that we're kind of seeing that more in both the tabletop and the dystopian sci-fi genres. The idea of what does it mean to have a community. Oh, by the way, if you're playing the cat drinking game, we see a cat take a drink of water because we're Rem PG. So hydrate yourself. Something I really like I'm seeing in sci-fi and dystopia spaces is the idea of writing stories and telling stories like with Misspent Youth that are about the idea of community action, the idea of coming together. It's not just about a terrifying, faceless, Soylent Green is people future, but also about the ability to hope in spite of different odds. Um, so, do you see that in sci-fi? Do you think sci-fi as a genre makes it easier to tell stories about community and hope?
Uh, all of the sci-fi and fantasy genres give the ability to do allegory, to bring in the concept of oppression or classism or misogyny or any of that stuff by substituting in a fantastical or scientific element. Um, and it's just recently that we've started really looking at the whole concept of own voices and um, hearing the story from themselves, from people who are oppressed, from this, like, I can have LGBT characters in my stories because they exist around me. They are my friends, but I cannot tell the story of what it is like to be one of those people. Only give them a place to exist, because they all have their own stories. There's a word called sonder, which is one of my favorite words out there. It's the moment at which you understand as you walk down the street or drive by that every single person that you pass has a life as rich and dramatic and varied and uh, complicated as your own. And I want to impart that, and other people are imparting that to me. Reading N.K. Jemisin, Nalo Hopkins, um, um, Elsa Sunajan, all those people give me a glimpse into what it's like to have a disability I don't have, to have a culture I don't have. Um, Wale Talabi is another person who's really good, and he writes a lot of cyberpunk, and I think he's fabulous. Alina Pete, who does Were Geek, but she's also I cannot remember. She's First Nations, Canadian, but I can't remember what her tribe is. But they bring that to the writing and what it's like to be in that culture in a way that I can't do, but I can learn from.
And I really like that too, because then it's a very authentic voice,
Mm.
really adding something. Do you find that same thing happening in horror right now or in occult spaces? Um,
So
yeah,
yes, Victor LaVey, he is doing some amazing stuff in horror. Ono uh, Nuzo, oh, did I get her name right? She is
I'm
too.
not going to know if you did or not. So
Linda Abbott.
I'm totally not transcribing this interview so I can have notes for people to read later. Totally not
Okay.
transcribing this interview.
Well, if I say a name that somebody wants to know about later and you can't remember it, ask me on Twitter. I'll be able to answer. Uh, but yes, um, Jordan Peele, his whole series of horror films. Um,
Yeah, Us was a phenomenal horror
Us
film,
had
especially.
so many different layers of themes, and uh, just there's that point in the movie where he's pulling the stuffing out of the arms of the chair to put into his ears to save his life, and it's literally he's picking cotton. And it was one of those things, and I didn't catch that. I caught that on an analysis from a BIPOC reviewer, and I was just like, "Holy crap!" I
Yeah.
totally did not get that, but oh, and so when I go back and rewatch these movies, where it's uh, the different BIPOC characters are not just the bad guys, not just the people who die first, not just the stereotype, whatever. Um, they're becoming the heroes. They're
Yeah.
also the villains. I mean, did you see Us?
Yes, Us was yeah, it's incredible.
Oh my
Is it on like your top 5 list of horror movies that people must see?
God. I don't have one of those. I have a top 5 list of movies, but they're very personal to me as a well, I was poor growing up, but I am now a fairly affluent 50 something white woman. So what I like probably won't be as interesting to other people.
But you yourself, along with doing sci-fi, there are shades of horror in like Tremille's Light. But you yourself also do some horror writing, correct? Or
I
some horror writing
do.
collecting?
I do a lot of horror writing. I've been nominated for the Bram Stoker Award twice for my young adult horror writing. Um, One of them is The Last Days of
Ooh,
Salton Academy, young adult
I that's great. I
zombies.
love that. Yeah.
And then I've been nominated also for the Bram Stoker Award for um, A Secret Guide to Fighting Elder Gods, which is teenagers fighting mythos creatures.
Yeah.
But I, as an editor, and I write horror. I like supernatural horror. I like writing supernatural horror. I don't like doing very realistic horror because, there's enough of that going on right now.
Yeah.
That I don't want to dwell on. Um, but writing horror gives me the opportunity to make sure certain people win and certain people lose, or certain monsters lose. Um, it's a way of allowing the underdog to become the hero, or not. I mean, in Last Days of Sultan Academy, I I kill a fan favorite. It's like the one character
Ooh.
you think is going to make it all the way through, and that's not what happens in real life. So
Yeah.
I break people's hearts in a lot of my stories, and by that I mean I get them to empathize with the character, the situation, and I never kill wantonly. I don't kill just to kill a character. There is an actual plot reason for a character to die. So and also, like, when I write horror, I won't write assault, sexual assault on any character at all. Period. End of story. You will
Yeah.
never find that in any of my stuff because I don't appreciate it.
I appreciate that you don't write that. Very much so. I
It's
also,
mm,
in your work, I feel like you tend to do more young adult stuff. I don't know if your horror is also young adult, but it feels like you have a passion for young adult more than quote unquote adult fiction.
well, I do in certain aspects. My BattleTech and Shadowrun, though Shadowrun I do both full on adult fiction, um, very adult fiction, and then I have the young adult stuff. For BattleTech, it's all young adult because I grew up military. I was a military dependent. I lived on military bases growing up, and military breds grow up differently than civilian kids. There is a very definite difference. And when I wrote those stories, I wrote it because I wanted to show where the hard bitten veteran comes from. They're not born with, a cigar in their mouth and snappy comebacks and, a scar on their cheek and the ability to stab somebody 32 times. It's there's there is layers to how this happens. And I wanted to write that. I wanted to write that in BattleTech. Uh, and so that's the first book, which was the Nellis Academy incident, which won the Scribe Award for the best young adult tie-in for that year. And then I wrote the Rogue Academy trilogy, which by and large is actually a kinder, gentler trilogy than the first novel was. Um, I mean, I still kill a lot of people, but
Yeah,
slightly.
it happens sometimes. I mean, especially in Shadowrun, especially in Shadowrun and Dystopia, that's
Yeah.
a big trope. So you've won quite a few awards. Not just out of flattery, but like that means people really resonate with your work. Your work has a lot of like polish and art to it that people really like. Which award is kind of most special to you, or which award means the most to you, or which
Mm.
two awards if you can't pick one?
Well, so nomination wise, I've been nominated for the Bram Stoker and the Hugo and the British Fantasy Award. Um, all three of those were for editing, and then Bram Stoker for writing. Um, and getting nominated for those big awards is very validating. Um, but I think winning a Scribe Award is one of those ones because the Scribe Award's kind of like the SAG Awards versus the Oscars. It's my peer group is judging my work, and they found it the best that year. So the Nellis Academy winning for 2015 um, was amazing. I was so pleased when that happened because my peer group said that I did good. And these are people who understand what it takes to do tie-in writing. They understand that, you know, their bosses can look at the work that you've written and say, you didn't write that character right. Even though you wrote it and it's your story, they can tell you things like, this character needs this difference. Or my favorite one, and favorite is in sarcasm. I got told for one of my stories that they wanted to cut the first chapter because two women talking was boring.
Oh, I don't like that. Oh,
Yeah, in the end, and
things a little.
so it was Arkham Horror, and my direct editor, Karen Alstrom, is amazing. She is one of the most technical editors I've ever worked with, and she's amazing. And she got that from her boss, and I don't think he understood exactly why that chapter was there. It was setting up power dynamics between the doctor and the patient and how each one had power over the other. And in the end, we got to put that chapter back, which was great. Uh,
Yay.
but it was one of those things that, when you write tie-in fiction, you have to be aware that somebody else can tell you what you have written is wrong. So I don't mind that, but okay, no, actually, I do mind that. I'm an author.
It's okay. It's okay. You're among creatives. That's what we kind of do here at Rem is
I'm
create.
your
So,
friend. Everybody needs an editor. I swear. As an editor, I also need an editor as a writer. And I think, oh, would you like to meet another cat?
I always want to meet cats. I think I'm not watching. I'm not looking at the Twitch chat, but I'm pretty sure cats are important to us in the Rem
Uh,
Alternis universe.
this is
So,
Luna. She came by. I'm going to let her go here, but
aw. So Arkham Horror. Is that a series of books, and you wrote a book for Arkham Horror, or is it like a
Arkham
genre?
board game. So
Oh, it's a board.
what
Oh, it's a
they
board game.
did,
I was like, is it a? I was like, I knew it was a board game. I was like, is it a book series too? Did I miss
so
something?
Arkham Horror is based on the whole Lovecraft
Yeah,
mythos of uh, Cthulhu and that whole mythos.
Cthulhu, the old ones, the people with the tentacles coming up out of the sea.
Yep,
It's yeah,
yep. The fish people, etc.
the fish people.
So Arkham Horror made a board game. I mean, Fantasy Flight Game made a board game called Arkham Horror, and what they did was they had 6 authors write um, origin stories for 6 original characters that showed up in the game.
Oh yes,
And
okay.
I got Carolyn Fern, the psychologist. So I got to write. Honestly, Arkham Horror is a sausage fest. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go all women. The doctor's a woman, the patient's a woman. Um, some of the one of the another doctor who they run into is female, which is it's one of those things where you have to explain that yes, there were black millionaires in the 1920s. Have you ever heard of the Harlem Renaissance? That's why there was an heiress. That's you know, so so I did have to explain on some of that because some of the first round readers were like, really? Like, yes,
Yes,
they
we have a
exist.
complicated history in this country, in America, and especially for. That's what's really intriguing about your work as well. Is you're going into these kind of quote unquote sausage fest spaces traditionally, especially Lovecraftian stuff feels very male lined and identified for many years. Would you agree with that? Do you think it's getting better? Is there more? Because I know there's some like female queer and BIPOC writers, and we've had some stuff on HBO where they've
Oh,
kind of been reclaiming Cthulhu.
Lovecraft is probably turning over in his grave to see what's happening now. But honestly, I mean, it was he as a writer, even for his time, he was misogynistic and racist and not a great person. And he made a really good world. He was terrible on dialogue. He wrote about 5,000 lines of dialogue, and most of them were not great. But his descriptions, amazing. And then all the other authors that he allowed to come in to help flesh out the world, also amazing. And again, Victor LaVey, The Ballad of Black Tom, amazing book. Um, Lovecraft Country on HBO,
Yes.
amazing series. Uncomfortable in spots. Holy crap, very uncomfortable. But I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Are there other occult writers that you really like, or occult literature outside of Lovecraftian mythos that you want to plug for people to like? If they're into it, this is where you should like we're having a reading rainbow moment. If you're into this, you should read this.
Okay, let's see. Well, Stephen Blackmore, his Eric Carter series is pretty amazing. If you want more Lovecraft-ish, Peter Klein's 14 The Fold. Um, if you want like really, really prescient and good science horror, Mira Grant, who is Shawnee Maguire in an alternate form, but holy crap, she is Cassandra, and nobody wants to believe her. And stuff that she wrote 15 years ago is actually happening now in a techno bio thriller way. Who else do I like to read? I'm really terrible on off the spur.
No, that's okay. It's just I like it off the top of the head because then you get the first reaction, and about 5 minutes from now, you're gonna go, "Oh shoot, this author! I want to bring up this author."
Well,
That's
like
perfectly
I
fine. Yeah.
know Ursula Vernon writes as T Fisher, I think is the name. She writes a lot of very, very cool, scary things
Yeah.
where you can empathize with the characters. For there is a series that she writes that involves a character sticking around in a horrible situation to save the dog. And absolutely, any dog owner out there would be like, "Yep, absolutely, I'm there. I would save that dog." Okay. Um, I mean, I also like really old. Uh, well, it's not horror; it's occult fiction. I
That's
actually
fine.
collect.
What's the difference between occult and horror? I guess because I people may
Well,
not know the difference.
okay. So I collect antique occult literature, which is a nonfiction. I'm going to put that in quotes. A nonfiction study of the supernatural and of the mystical and of the arcane, whereas horror is a fiction that is predicated on um, supernatural and horrific things happening, um, but not aliens because aliens moves it over into thriller. The thing you have to realize about all these genres and such, it's really they're all marketing terms. How can they be pigeonholed? So if it's aliens, it's science horror or science fiction and thriller. If it's demons in space, it's still horror. Uh,
If it's
aliens,
Vincent Price, it's horror. You know that kind of thing.
yeah. Well, generally, yeah. I don't think I've read it or watched anything of his that isn't horror. Horror. Um,
I have
and
some
now
feelings about Mask of Red Death, where I don't think Mask of Red Death is horror, but people would disagree with me on that. So
it is. It's got a horrifying. It's more suspense than horror to me,
yeah.
but it's again, it's you're splitting hairs. I mean,
Yes.
it's
And I don't have a lot of hairs to split, unfortunately. It's all on my chin now, and I can't afford to lose any of those. Okay, so one of your other major things that you like to collect, and I'm hoping we can talk about, is fantasy coins. I
ah,
misinterpreted this when I asked you because I was like fantasy coins in fiction, but you have living actual fantasy coins in your
I
home,
do,
and
I
I'm sure
do.
none of them are cursed or haunted or will lead
Yeah.
you to being the head of a ship of ghost pirates. Um,
Let me see if I can show this.
do you
Let's
have
see
do you
if
have a
you can
favorite
see it.
fantasy or
There. These are all
yeah.
different fantasy coins. from like Norse Foundry, Rare Elements. Uh, it's like we have dragons. Let me see if I can find
Ooh, I love that.
this. Yeah,
Yes.
and the mysterious package. Um, I like fantasy coins because I like the concept of treasure. Not actually being, I mean, I was going to say not being rich, but rich is nice.
Yeah.
Money makes things comfortable, but I like the concept of finding treasure. But when to answer your question about fantasy coins, some of the favorites, like the John Wick, which by the way is a fantasy. I don't John Wick is not as supernatural fantasy. I love the concept of the coins in there because they're a plot point. There's two different types. Um, I love American Gods had Mad Sweeney's Lucky Coin.
Oh, yeah, that's the one I couldn't
And
remember.
while I've never watched Game of Thrones, I do know about the coin Valor Morgulis. All Men Must Die.
Sure, yes. I never read I read one half of a Game of Thrones book, and I was like, I can't do this to myself." So, the only fantasy coin I could think of, like, in the front of my brain, because I couldn't think of any others for some reason, was all I could think were the kind of religious inscription coins from Harry Dresden, and maybe it's because we have Paranormal Albany on Mondays, and that's
Yeah.
Harry Dresden based, but all I could think of was their kind of, pseudo-religious coins that are like a take on, giving away your soul to the ferryman type of thing,
Well,
so
I like to collect those fantasy coins because I like treasure. I collect antique occult literature, and I like to collect antique keys, like,
yeah.
antique keys.
I'm sure they don't open doorways into scary worlds where you go in with a
No,
pen
what
and
could go
paper.
wrong? Nothing can go wrong.
Nothing can
Actually,
go wrong.
a friend of mine, because she knows that I like keys, actually got me a replica of a key from Alcatraz.
Oh, have fun.
And one of the reasons I collect keys is because as an author, I am the key master, and points to anybody who catches that. I am the key master. I hold the keys to my own jail. I am the person who locks myself in. I have the ability to get myself out of the prisons that I create. And it's one of those things that I believe in, that I will, if I am running into a problem somewhere, um, if I don't have the key to solve the problem, I have the key to someone who can solve the problem. So, and it's something I've learned. I grew up with it being military. There are no problems that you cannot solve or find someone who can solve them for you.
And for everything else, there's duct tape. So
Or
here's the or explosive duct tape. Well, they're kind of like the two ends of the spectrum. Right? Duct
Yep,
tape for keeping things together, explosives for making them not be together anymore. It's the
yes,
two
yes,
sides of the coin there.
yeah.
Um, so here are the two questions. My first one is for your key set. Do you have the key to the fifth element room in Egypt?
So my husband's not here and he's not watching this. My husband and my first date was watching Fifth Element, and our anniversary is coming up, and I literally just bought that prop to give to him for our 15th anniversary.
Oh, that's amazing.
We had our first kiss during the diva scene.
Oh, that's a good place to have your first kiss, though. Also, a good place for a good martial arts fight on a
Yeah,
space cruise ship.
yeah,
Such a
absolutely.
great movie.
One
Oh
of those
god, the
things.
stones are in me.
But yes,
Um,
the answer is yes. I mean, it's currently wrapped, but
yes. Here's an interesting kind of question, and we're getting it's 5:50 now where I am because I'm on the West Coast. So we're gonna start kind of wrapping up here a little bit.
all right.
So the idea of keys, the idea of coins and fantasy, something I'm interested in as a writer myself that does fantasy and horror, is I'm always looking for the idea of dystopia versus utopia, and the idea of coin and money
Mhm.
in universes. The idea of Star Trek: The Next Gen fascinates me because they have no currency system, but they still have all these layers of power. So, to you, is it easier or harder to write a world without money in like sci-fi? Like for Tremille's Light, does Tremille's Light have a lot of like money or currency in it?
Absolutely not. See, for me, unless it is a plot point, um, and in general, unless it's a plot point, money and commerce is not mentioned. But it is something that happens in like a different Shadowrun, and uh, we even have it touched on in the anthology I edited with Cat Rambo called The Reinvented Heart. Uh, Commerce, the exchanging of service for goods versus money for goods, um, changes in sci-fi. What becomes valuable is based on society and based on the system that's set up. So you can bet in Star Trek that there's got to be some sort, it's a cashless society and everybody gets, they can have what they want. But you can bet there is a limit to that. Whether
Yeah.
they have a replicator or not even going into the whole unfeasibility of a replicator in general. I mean, it's the energy expenditure is actually tremendous and outlandish, and
That Earl Grey hot, it's gonna doom the ship one day, Picard.
yes, but it is a plot point in like a video game like Shadowrun that you need Nuyen, that you have different levels of lifestyle. In fact, there's a new um, source book that just came out called Lifestyles of the Shadowy and Infamous, I believe is the name of the source book. I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm going to because
It's an amazing title. It really is. It's
yes,
yes.
um, because having money and needing money is a plot point in Shadowrun. So in See How She Runs, that's a plot point. Actually, with some of no, actually all of the young adult money is an issue that comes up, um, but it doesn't specifically come. It doesn't matter in my novel Elfin Black because my main character is ultra rich. Like he is top of the top. He is a British white guy from a very very rich family. Like, but his dad holds the purse strings. That's the only
Yeah.
reason why it's even mentioned. Um, and I think that's one of the interesting things about writing young adult versus uh, adult fiction. A lot of my adult fiction, I don't worry that much about money because as an adult, I've worked for my money. You can make some assumptions, unless it is a specific plot point that you're poor or that you have cancer and you need to start a meth lab or something so
Or
that you
you're
can,
Harry Dresden and people are hiring you like a private eye because it's a
yeah,
40s throwback. Yeah.
it's not a big thing. Young adult, generally, it's a thing of, do I have enough allowance to get this thing that I want? If it's even part of it's very small scale. Young adult people, it's how do you affect the world? I like that because young adults don't actually think that far ahead. They don't have the whole action and consequences thing down, and also the world revolves around them. I love that.
Yes.
Whereas adults, we understand the consequences of our actions half the time,
Yeah.
and we understand that there's a whole set of responsibilities. You have a job, you have a family, you have a kid, you have a mortgage or rent or something. And when I'm writing young adult, I don't have to worry about that as much
That's
when I'm
something.
writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something I've really enjoyed about things like Rugrats and Recess is they take the idea of adulthood, but they turn it on its head, or they take it to interesting, weird, illogical conclusion. And so I like that there's a place in fantasy and fiction for taking the idea of adulthood, but taking the money issue out of it or making money more the central issue. All right. Thank you for this fabulous interview, Jennifer. It was so cool to get to know you. And I promise, even though I don't know your husband, I won't say what the fabulous gift is. Everyone who's listening in, you all are in on the secret. So you all
Oh, by
have to
the time
be nice
I
and
think
quiet.
I if he
Yeah.
finds it somehow, I won't blame you.
I mean, just take it, just take him to Egypt. That's what you've got to do. That's where the tomb is with all the stones that need to go in place.
Actually, I
So,
own the stones.
ooh, okay.
I have a
Well,
lot of props.
so now I know where to come. We've got the giant evil comet with a skeleton face on it headed toward the planet. Now we know where to go. We come to your house. That's where we get the stones from.
Trail.
Okay, so we're gonna go. I'm gonna give you probably the hardest question I can think of
Okay.
as our exit. Who is the best Doctor Who companion and why?
It's Donna Noble. There's no contest. Donna Noble has an actual character arc. She is her own woman who knows her own mind. I think she got done dirty a little bit by having to have her mind um, wiped. I'm very interested in finding out what happens with Tennant coming back.
Yeah.
Um,
They
but for
are
me,
going to bring Donna back. She is coming back for, like, either a special or for something, so she is coming back,
for
so
next season, because David Tennant is coming back for a short run of the,
yes.
and so I saw a trailer where they were trying to hide David Tennant from Donna Noble because if she sees his face, her brain's going to explode. And I'm like, I mean,
I
there
mean,
were
that's how I
worse movies.
feel. That's how I feel when I watched that show with Michael Sheen and David Tennant, the online thing where they were pretending to bicker for, like, 2 seasons. I can't remember the name
Oh,
of it.
uh,
Unscripted or something like that.
mhm.
But yeah, thank you. That was the hardest sci-fi question I could think of for someone that I knew British. So I agree with you. I'm a big Rose fan, but I really do
Julie
love
Rose, but,
Donna.
who was the one that came after Rose? Uh,
Martha would be between.
Martha. I do like Martha a lot.
I'm a
I'm
big
looking forward.
Yanto fan myself because I loved Torchwood for a long time. So Yanto from Torchwood
Yeah,
would probably be one that I would. Um, So thank you, Jennifer, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you for insight on writing, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you for joining me for Rem Chats. Thank you to the audience, and I hope you had a good time as well.
I did. Thank you very much. And if you want to follow me, I'm Jennifer Brozak on Twitter and Facebook.
And you have a blog. You have like a
I
writing.
do have a blog, jenniferbrozak.com/blog.
Yeah, it's a great blog. All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great night.
Bye bye.
Bye.